Each unit gets limited SP and 2 skill slots for inheritances. How you fill those slots does a lot to shape any playthrough, and no guide to the game would be complete without analyzing your choices. My series Expertly Enjoy and Engage is trying to be a complete guide to the game, so that means I have to cover skill inheritance and team building at some point. That's where skill issues comes in. This mini-series within Expertly Enjoy and Engage will give every single inheritable skill its 15 minutes of fame while tiering them all. If you don't want to sift through the haystack of bad skills to find what I recommend, I'll accompany that exhaustive coverage with more focused advice on how I see team building in Engage. Use the chapters if you're interested in a specific topic. This is the first part of 3, following Engage is split into 3 arcs. Part 1 covers everything up to Chapter 10. I have a couple disclaimers to get out of the way before we get going. First, this miniseries will sound somewhat prescriptive. Don't take it personally. I'd be heartbroken if any of my videos make a viewer feel bad about having fun playing Engage their way. These videos will be a lot more watchable if I don't insert anti-elitism rants after every paragraph, however, so I'm just going to give that rant here. Imagine a speech after every instance of should, best, and the like. People have different tastes in Engage the same way they do in food. That's not to say there's no point in comparison, but rather that there's a fundamental subjective component. I'm vegetarian. If I watched a video about how to cook and it said every dinner must have a meat, I'd know the video is not meant for me, and also that posting a comment about hating the smell of bacon would probably not make me any friends or change any hearts. Take these videos in the spirit of a cookbook for Engage. Ideally, you see something you want to try, make it yourself, and like the results. If not, that's fine. Our tastes may differ. Second, these videos will contain major plot spoilers. There are unavoidable minor spoilers throughout the series, but I do try to be coy about major story beats. I cannot talk around what happens in Chapter 10 here. If that bothers you, stop and come back later. Let me get my spoiler-free advice out of the way. The game's UI does you no favors explaining this. If you pay for Strength plus 1, that cost is subtracted from the other Strength plus skills. You don't have to keep a skill slot empty the whole game just to save up for Strength plus 5. Canter and favorite food are pretty good. More generally, if you look at what I've inherited in the main series as a rough template, you won't be led that far astray. If Chapter 10 spoilers would bother you, stop watching and come back later. Alright, I think they're gone. I'll start with my recommendations for what to do before Chapter 10, and then move on to the exhaustive skill-by-skill analysis. First, Canter. Canter is not a strong standout you should consider. It's the best way to spend 1000 SP on almost any unit. Canter changes the way you play. No tonic can replace it, no stat boosters can fill the void it leaves in your team, no amount of damage or bulk can fully replicate what moving 2 extra squares can do for you. Even if you have specific plans requiring both skill slots late in the game, 1000 SP is a small price to pay for 10 plus maps of Canter. Canter's also just fun. It adds a lot of tactical depth to the game. I'm sympathetic to contrarianism, and I'm not inheriting Canter on everyone in the series, in part to show you have fun alternatives, but there really aren't better alternatives. Second, favorite food. We're about to get Lucina, and soon after that we'll get Byleth. They give Micaiah a run for her money. Every turn they're engaged makes everything easier. Both Lucina and Byleth require positioning near the front line. Unlike Micaiah, they can't just go off searching for an energy tile without disrupting your clear. Favorite food's your ticket to extra turns with their incredible power for the incredible bargain of 200 SP. Like Canter, favorite food's also just a fun skill that gives you new ways to play maps. If you have planned Lucina and Byleth partners now, give them favorite food. If anyone else has the bond rank with Celica, it's worth considering on them too, just for flexibility. If you never use it, you didn't spend much to get it. But if you realize in a couple maps that 3 turns of functional invincibility on your best unit is pretty good actually, you will go most of the game regretting not inheriting this while you had the chance. It is a bit more work to use in Canter. If you're not okay with rigging even C-rank meals or planning around it at all, look elsewhere, but you're missing out. Those skills are irreplaceable. Nothing else is quite like that, so after inheriting those, I'd take stock of your SP books and fragments, and consider discretionary spending. Also, do remember to get weapon proficiencies on anyone who needs them before spending all your fragments. It's hard to say how much to spend on skills beyond the above, but as a general rule, I think players tend towards hoarding. If you're debating whether something's worth a book now, it probably is. I'll highlight a few good value skills. Anyone using staves should get Staff Mastery. It's cheap and low opportunity cost. You can always replace it with something else, but there aren't many ways to increase staff hit if you need a freeze at some point. Inherit Lance Power or Sword Power on units mainly using lances or swords, SP books permitting. +2 damage isn't as immediately impactful as other skills, but the higher versions of these skills give excellent returns. I'd think of these as favoritism plays, spending 1000 SP now on a unit you want to succeed on the front lines, and plan to keep funneling SP into later. If someone's not going to stay on the team, there's no reason not to spend their SP on something. That's usually hit +10, build +3, or strength +1 at 500 SP. If you stop watching now, you'll still be ahead of the curve. There are a lot more skills to talk about, however, so let's get tiering. I'm not worrying too much about the placements, it's just a framing for the discussion. I'm not including copies of every tiered skill because that would make things way harder to parse, so each of these stands in for the whole skill line. Most importantly, if you're mad at my placements, leave a comment arguing with me, subscribe for more rage bait, and share with your friends so they can hate watch. Let's get started. Marth's skills are weird because of his availability. Many of these are questionable early inherits, and even if they can be cool late, that's a long way off. Avoid +20 is inheritable now for the eye-watering sum of 2500 SP. We don't have any units this makes sense on right now, and we won't for a long time. Avoid is only good when you have a lot of it. Going from 50% to 30% isn't usually changing how I play. Going from 22% to 2%, now we're talking. On Maddening, the problem is that going from 2% to 0% often hurts, so you really need to know what extra Avoid is doing on a given map. My advice is to only inherit Avoid Plus now if you've run calculations projecting hit rates. And Engage Maddening, Vibes-based dodge tanking's tough. Break Defenses is a rare damage multiplier. In theory, this can be way better value than additive skills. 50% extra damage or 25% if you double sounds great, but then there's the condition. Against enemies you have weapon triangle advantage against who aren't armors on player phase. I think the biggest problem with Break Defenses is that it's an expensive skill with limited upside. Even if Break Defenses meant you insta-killed any unit after a break, that's at most 1 unit a turn, and often less than that. That's not bad, but if I'm spending so much on a unit so early, I'm hoping they can do a little more than a lucky Alchrist. Late game it has more applications due to enemy stats scaling up and the cost feeling more reasonable, but I'm not rating skills based on a couple maps near the end of the game. Perceptive is markedly worse than Avoid Plus. The description on Serena's Forest I put in my Marth analysis is misleading, so let me clarify. Perceptive grants extra Avoid only on player phase, equal to either 15 or 30, plus your speed divided by 4. On player phase, we can avoid damage without dodging through breaks or manipulating enemy range, and at most Perceptive can activate once or twice a turn. That's usually a waste of a skill slot. The steep discount compared to Avoid plus 15 or plus 30 is appealing though. This doesn't need to be useful every map to recoup its investment. I'll pitch this for Martial Masters. They have fantastic natural avoid and terrible bulk, especially with the flashing fist art. They can often 4-hit KO an opponent but die after the second hit to a counterattack. Perceptive can help fix that at little opportunity cost. Some units don't have a good way of spending SP beyond 1 or 2 reasonably priced skills. Inheriting Perceptive may literally just delay another inherit on them for a map or two and cost you nothing else, and from that perspective, even using it once or twice and feeling like a genius is a good deal. Many skills have confusing prices. You might think Sword Agility should be a good deal. To compare, Sword Power is definitely better bang for your buck than the equivalent unconditional damage. You'd be disappointed. Sword Agility 3, which gives Avoid plus 20 but also crit minus 10 and only while using swords, costs 2000 SP. Avoid plus 20, which you can inherit the very next bond level, costs 2500 SP. Is that 500 SP really worth being locked to a fairly limited weapon type? The only reason you'd normally want Sword Agility is to stack with Avoid plus, but that's going to cost you an awful lot of SP bucks. If you're doing an Elir solo run, I'd guess that putting all your books into getting these and then just waltzing through maps while every enemy reads 0 hit is a funny way to go for it, but on a large team you're going to have problems getting the scratch for stacking these. Even if you do, reading 0 hit isn't that great on Maddening. Because Engage lets you pay for tiered skills in installments, many skills are useful quick inherits even if you have to wait until late in the game to upgrade them. Avoid isn't like that. If anything, it's actively detrimental to only have a little of it. Getting Sword Agility when Marth returns could make sense, but are you really willing to play most of the game without that skill slot doing anything? Unyielding is cheap for a reason. Many low HP units want to stay that way as the game goes on, to maximize skills like Reprisal or to manipulate enemy AI. If this activated after every combat, it would be a way of increasing survivability, but this only works on the next player phase. It saves you healing rather than increasing your effective HP. This is the inaugural member of what I call the Spreadsheet Emblem tier of skills. I'm sure there exist situations inheriting this makes sense, but unless you have a page of calculations showing why you need unyielding, I'd claim you have a better alternative. Sigurd's inheritable skills really live up to his reputation as one of the best units in Fire Emblem history. Cantor's the inheritable skill of Engage, and I've already shown and discussed it at length. It has its own tier for a reason. It even makes the other skills here better. It's a good bet you're already getting level 5 bond rank with Sigurd, so that's basically discounted from the rest of these skill costs. Headlong Rush is not a part of any awesome endgame build. On the flip side, it's quite cheap, enough that using it for even a few maps is good value and hard to replace. I think the biggest downside of Headlong Rush is its reliance on AI manipulation. Freeze staves have a huge range, so normally you're trying to Jedi mind trick the staffer into targeting the Headlong Rush unit, like I did in Tiki's Paralogue. I don't really consider that a part of normal gameplay. Sure, you can do trial and error to figure out what'll happen, but if you're just playing maps once, you'd have to know more about enemy staff AI than I do to get much value. There are certainly places that this works even without that planning, like against ice dragons, but I wouldn't go out of my way to inherit this on people. Instead, I'd recommend it for someone who already has the bond ring with Sigurd as a cheap insurance plan. Sometimes it's convenient to have a unit that can go off and kill a free staff user, and restore is not always feasible. Hit Plus isn't going to get the series any clicks, but many units want it all the same. Hit Plus 15 is the equivalent extra accuracy of 7.5 dex. A single unit with this skill can often get a deployment slot as a specialist for dealing with annoying bosses or thieves, and it more than erases any accuracy difference from stats in the early game. It's best on units with poor hit going for one-shots or using inaccurate weapons. Your Great Knight Louis might be able to one-shot a mage, but only if they hit with their axe. Because of engraves and the diversity of Engage's weapons, it's often possible to use that extra reliability to add damage, which can be more efficient than inheriting damage and using a weaker, more accurate weapon. Lance Power, as the other weapon power skills, scales well. Each extra +2 damage costs 1000 SP. That's twice the ratio of Strength or Magic, which cost 1000 per point of damage. That makes it a good way to spend SP books on a unit you want to give special treatment. Lances are the worst of these power skills, no good magic option and less might than axes for one-shots, but they're hardly bad weapons on the whole. I often give this to Amber, whether he's going to be an halberdier or paladin or whatever else. If you feel about, say, Alfred the way I feel about Amber, you won't regret giving him this either. I first tried inheriting momentum only in a planning run for this series, and I'm a convert. It's conditional, sure, but it has fantastic value. Strength plus 6 costs 6000 SP and isn't even available yet, and momentum can do the same thing with 1000 SP. It only applies to the first hit of combat on player phase, but for some units that's okay. Those units are strong mobile attackers going for one-shot thresholds on player phase, think Etiquette, Louis, or Amber. Units that double reliably usually prefer something else. There's also a few engage attacks, like Leif's quadruple hit, that can multiply the bonus for some incredible damage. It's worth highlighting engage attacks because those tend to be all or nothing. You either hit the cool benchmark or you don't. There are strategies momentum opens up that simply aren't possible otherwise. Momentum Plus is useless unless you have more than 10 movement, which is basically impossible unless you have Sigurd equipped and don't need the inherit, but I'd argue that's actually a good thing. You can give someone Cantor and Momentum now, and you have an endgame viable skill built, no further investment needed. That frees up resources for other units who want pricey skills like Lance Power 5. Celica's a roller coaster. I already gave my favorite food spiel. It's really good, the 200 SP cost feels like a typo, and I'd generally inherit this on a couple units who you plan to have using support emblems later, or who already have the Celica bond rank. I can't even fake enthusiasm for Holy Stance. If this is doing a lot of work, you're taking a ton of damage, and that's probably not going to end well. Enemies have way more total HP than you do. That's why lifesteal is so great on your units. The reverse of lifesteal is the reverse of great. I'm not sure I've ever seen this contribute to a run. Magic Plus scales poorly. After you get a discounted trial of Magic Plus 2 for 1000 SP, Magic Plus 3 and onwards cost 1000 SP per point. That's bad compared to other damage sources, but if you're using tomes, there's no tome power to get instead. This is actually one of the reasons the Levin sword's so great. It lets you use the more economical sword power skills. I think the biggest problem I have with inheriting this is that it's, to me, a little boring. You're spending SP now just to give a unit more stats, probably so they can Juggernaut even harder. I genuinely enjoy spending SP books to balance my roster, but as a certified Anna stan, I definitely appreciate the role Magic Plus has in the metagame. It's not a skill you're excited about, but sometimes it's your best option. Resonance is the same SP damage ratio as magic, but it costs HP, only goes up to +3, and only works with tomes. It's worse than Magic Plus, which is already not amazing, and it only makes sense if you stack it like Celica users do. This is Spreadsheet Emblem tier. It can be the last part of a damage stack, but you should really make sure you've already thought of Magic Plus, Meals, Forges, Divinely Inspiring, Spur Attack, Rallies, and the rest. I'll also note that we'll have bigger things to worry about than Micaiah XP in the future. That HP loss won't be a plus like it's been so far. Tome Precision scales up to hit Avo +15 for 2000 SP late in the game, and you can easily see how inaccurate Tome users or some crazy dodge tank build might like this. I already used Tome Precision 1 with Yunaka to hit a precise avoid threshold, but that's maybe not the best long-term game plan. The specialized hit and avoid skills give much better value, and it's rare a unit needs both effects. If you go nuts with this and it works out, send me the clip of your Tome Precision Avoid Plus Fram soloing maps. Micaiah's interesting, because I think out of all the emblems she has the biggest gap between what her skills are about and who actually builds bond rank with her. Jean may have used Micaiah, but he doesn't want any of these. The same applies for many units who just want her XP factory. Still, if you're using Micaiah on a staffer already or have extra bond fragments, there's some stuff here worth consideration. Healing Light is most useful for Great Sacrifice on Micaiah herself. It's hard to see how this is great when you aren't using Micaiah, but it's cheap and not useless, and sometimes that's all you want. The larger issue is that the only way you'd normally have a staff user who should be taking damage by this point is if you've promoted a Lear, Chloe, or Saline. If you've used a Precious Master Seal on them and want them to take damage, you probably have grander plans for their 2 skill slots than Healing Light. The pitch is probably inheriting this alongside Staff Mastery and then switching them out depending on the map. That's a lot of effort and definitely a flex, and I wish I had a great use for it lined up later so I could look smart by inheriting it now, but alas, I got nothing. I'd probably be harsher on this skill if it didn't make my Chapter 10 clear work out. Sure, I didn't need to inherit it there, but sometimes this really is better than a healing item because it activates Canter. Resistance is not a premium stat. There are far more enemies that use physical weapons. The first few skills are cheap at least, so maybe it's not the worst quick inherit on a unit you play on the bench, but the exponential scaling here is ridiculous. 2000 SP for Resistance +5. What is this, airport food? It's another Spreadsheet Emblem skill. I'm sure someone's used it for something it made sense for, but it's not the sort of thing you randomly slap on a unit and get value from. Silence Horde is the lamer cousin of Headlong Rush. Silence is a much rarer sight on enemies, and unlike Freeze, Silence is rarely a mortal danger. Also, unlike Freeze, most of your army is immune to the effect. Still, like Headlong Rush, it's hard to regret inheriting this too much if you're giving it to someone who already had the bond rank for it. Staff Mastery is quite useful for offensive staves like Freeze. Those can't be forged or engraved to increase hit, supports don't affect them, and you can't normally work around them missing. The extra healing's nice too, even if it's not huge. This is an easy pickup for anyone using staves. It's quite cheap. You don't have to equip it every map, but if it lets you get out of a really tight jam even once or twice, it may be worth it. By the time it's really important, you can inherit it again, so unlike Favorite Food, I won't try to scare you into inheriting it. Roy's a breath of fresh air after some less than great selections. I can't say I've ever inherited Advance, but anything that lets you move more has potential. For Roy, this helps mitigate being sword locked, but that's not something you want to inflict on yourself. If you give units 1-2 ranged weapons and a mount, they get the benefit of Advance every turn without the skill slot. I can certainly imagine a scenario where this stacks on top of a mount to give you something special, but let me put it this way, it's a lot more situational than Canter, which is just 500 SP more. Do you really want both of these skills on the same unit so they get 0 skills to help with combat itself? This is definitely not a good long-term plan. I'm convinced a highly planned run like this one can probably find a place for it in the short term, but I didn't manage it. If you have, let me know in the comments. Holdout is pricey, but it's clearly valuable. Dying is bad, and Holdout prevents that. It can be truly awesome in the right combo, particularly with Lifesteal. The problem is that none of that will really come together until later, so it's hard to see why you need to spend a ton of your SP books to inherit this right now. Also, even then, you often don't want to inherit this. Units trying to be superstar immortal juggernauts rending entire armies asunder often want Roy's Ball of stats, so it's common to inherit the other parts of your combo. The best version of this, that procs so long as you have more than 1 HP, is 5000 SP. Vantage is a lot cheaper if that's what you're trying to combine together. Still, out of respect for its ceiling, I'll rate it good. Some of Engage's best builds inherit this. Strength is useful, clearly, but like magic, it's not a great economic proposition. Sword, lance, and axe power all exist and do more for less, not to mention skills like momentum. Sometimes you have a unit that uses 2 weapon types and can't just pick one, but the main use case is daggers. There's no knife power, so if you want Yunaka to do more damage, this is one of your only options. Same argument as Anna with Magic Plus. I'd still almost always prefer something else. Sword power is great, even better than lance power. If you know a unit will only be using swords, this is one of the best things to get them in the short and long term. A unit using both the Levin sword and physical swords can use this to get both strength and magic simultaneously. If you give this a Sword Griffin Chloe, you're well on your way to one of Engage's single best builds. Leif's inherits match his emblem. They can be good, but you gotta put in some effort to help them shine. Arm Shield works great on Leif himself, because he'll switch weapons to keep it active, but it's quite situational without him. I hadn't inherited Arm Shield before this series, and I've never seen anyone recommend using it. But when I tried to write the section, I couldn't think of a good reason why not. It's conditional, sure, but 5 less damage taken for 400 SP is an incredible bargain. We won't get comparable skills for a good while, and they'll be much more expensive. We're going to find out together how useful this is. I've given it to my Great Knight Lapis, who has 2 weapon types in Great Bulk already. If I find out it's worthless or a hidden gem, I'll be sure to leave a comment about it. Build Plus is overhated, and I can see why. Speed Plus will cost the exact same even though 1 point of build can at best be 1 point of speed. Speed Plus 4 requires beating a paralog to unlock and ranking all the way up to level 16 though. And for units with poor build using heavy weapons, sometimes Build Plus 4 is basically as good. I don't think you should sweat bond fragments too much, but level 16 is a real opportunity cost, both in terms of maps you play without the skill inherit and fragments. Build Plus also stacks with Speed Plus, which can be good for units like Citrine who might even forego Canter to hit those all-important benchmarks. Just make sure you're actually getting your money's worth. As units promote and slowly level build, sometimes this stops actually helping. Knife precision is interesting because dagger users often do want to dodge tank, unlike mages. I can't really see this deserving a skill slot at the end of the game, however, because if you're interested in fixing accuracy or dodge tanking, the specialized hit and avoid skills max out much higher. From a raw SP per stat point of view though, on units that only use daggers, I can see the appeal. At 300 SP, there's not a lot of downside, even if you do eventually drop it for something better. It's easy to underrate small reliability improvements. If this has even a decent chance of saving a reset, it's a big win. Plus, you can always stack it with Avoid. If you're trying to go all in on dodge tank Yunaka, having multiple abilities you can take on or off as needed on a given map seems like a pretty good way to do it. Vantage is the classic Fire Emblem broken combo skill. It makes a powerful glass cannon into a 1-person army, but it doesn't make an average unit that much better. We just don't have the ability to get 100 crit or massive raw damage on enemy phase early, so right now it's hard to recommend. The 25% requirement is stringent. If it were 50% or 75% at its first level, you could see using this in random situations where you and the enemy are both at low health, but I generally advise skipping it for now. Also, the best Vantage build besides maybe Reprisal is in Warrior with Wrath, and Leif's Adaptable is required for that. You don't inherit this. I'll still put it in good, out of respect for the high ceiling. Although the DLC emblems aren't really ordered and they aren't going away, so we don't need to inherit anything now, I'll go over the ones I have now for consolidation's sake. There are a few great skills here, but if you don't have the DLC, you really aren't missing much. Sigurd's Pool is probably better than the entire DLCs combined. Three Houses has a nice skill package, but nothing that translates into a great inherit. Assembly Gambit is what you get because they didn't want to make your units that aren't using the Three Houses bracelet deal with the house switching gimmick. It moves you and your foe back a space, which isn't actually a skill from the bracelet itself, but is another fun Three Houses callback. It's quite pricey compared to even Advance, and it's not easy to think of places this is very useful. I trawled through my notes trying to find a place I could look cool by inheriting this, and I came up empty. Unlike at Advance, it moves you back, so the ideal setup here is a powerful enemy you've already approached and want to move. Smash weapons can do that without spending any SP, and if you just kill an enemy, you don't need to fuss with their position. I'd love to hear about cool setups for this, but until then I think it's mostly useless. If I weren't writing these scripts, I would not be able to tell you which guard skills each emblem gives. That says a lot. My brain deemed this information less valuable than random Amber quotes. Why? The only reason I can possibly think of to inherit these is as a quote-unquote cheap way of hitting some stat benchmark for a map. Lin's paralog has almost all bows, for example. I suppose if you've been playing all night, you might convince yourself that this is a reasonable use of your SP and a skill slot, instead of just inheriting a generally applicable skill or using Lucina, or finding some other way of doing whatever you're trying to do. If you have a spreadsheet showing why all the previous tools, and also now Geosphere and Divine Blessing, weren't good enough, I guess? But come on. Lineage requires some math to evaluate. Maddening's XP formula is designed to prevent units from snowballing too hard. A unit 1 level ahead of the enemies gets 8 XP for a kill. If that unit levels up and is now 2 levels ahead, they get 6 XP. That's a 25% reduction, and it only gets harsher from there. Lineage gives 20% XP rounded down, so it's not undoing that reduction. Compared to a non-lineage unit, you get to 2 levels ahead slightly faster, but then your XP gain slows and they catch up. Over time, that's averaging out to something like half a level, assuming a unit's doing enough combat to stay above enemies. It's around a quarter point in every stat, about the tiniest boost you can imagine. If you're going to inherit this, it's on early units like Jean, where just getting them caught up more quickly is valuable, before you replace it with a skill that actually does stuff. It's outclassed by mentorship, which we'll get later, so it only makes sense on those early villager types. If it makes you feel like you're doing everything you can to make Warrior Clan awesome, you could do a lot worse with the 2 novice books you'll need for it, but it really is a training wheel you take off later. The double stat skills have pretty nasty exponential scaling, so do think about whether you're willing to commit to this skill slot for the rest of the game. Compared to Strength plus 5 and Dex plus 5, the extra skill slot you free up costs 1400 SP, which is honestly pretty good when you consider that you're probably only spending that much if you're pouring all your resources into a few units. If you're going to play favorites, go all the way. It's not excellent though. Like Strength Plus, it's just not very efficient compared to other damage sources. Engraves and Forges are much cheaper for similar effects. Weapons are also tradable. Weapon Sync's good, but it's pricey and has limited upside. Like Break Defenses, that makes it a tricky value proposition. Momentum is 2000 SP less and often does roughly the same thing, as an example. On the other hand, other emblems don't switch weapon types constantly, so you get consistent player phase damage inheriting this. Basically everyone has swords as their weapon type, unfortunately, even a few that really shouldn't. The only exceptions are Hector Camilla axes, Tiki Special, Lin Bow, and Celica Micaiah tomes. My pitch for this is player phase Lin archers like Ulchrist. You can turn plus 5 damage into plus 10 or even plus 20 with doubling or quadrupling, not to mention critical hits. You're not going to miss the strength on enemy phase either. Tiki's skills are quite the mixed bag. I don't see this said enough. Geosphere is one of the best inheritable skills in the game. Doesn't require any stats or actions to be effective, so it's great on units like Cedal. It also has great synergy with Lucina and Alir, who both have adjacency bonuses already. I'd be lying if I said I didn't frequently forget to set it up, because you need to position properly the turn before you want the effect, but that's a skill issue. Any skill supporting allies is incredibly valuable, because you only have 2 skill slots and each unit has a personal SP pool. If you apply this bonus to a unit with 2 other skills, it's like they got a 3rd slot and extra SP. Bulk also gets better the more you have, so this can often take a unit from good to unkillable, where a non-DLC player couldn't. When I play without DLC, I often wish I had this. I don't feel the same about Starsphere. HP Luck is the funniest double stat skill in the game, because it proves that even the people that make Fire Emblem games know how useless luck is. It's only 3600 SP for both HP and Luck plus 10, which would be absurdly broken if the stats in question were any good. Even so, I can honestly see the idea behind using it on Saline or Anna. Add to the proc rate for Divine Pulse and or make it killing, get some extra bulk, maybe set up Reprisal, and get 5 extra points of hit and avoid. It's not as aggressively anti-meta as pure luck inheritance is, but it's close. Winning with this is a flex. It makes your combat rating incredible. Lysphere is decent on Tiki because she's often on units that are doing combat away from your main force, and Tiki users have huge HP bars that your healers will sometimes not fully replenish. Every so often, you will appreciate being able to automatically cure poison or similar effects. As an inherit, be most useful on a unit you're planning to just hold forward with in solo maps. Pretty hard to do that on Maddening if you're using a skill slot on Lysphere, and I can't imagine that'll make the game particularly interesting even if it works. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think Light Sphere is almost always worse than Luck Plus. That can remove crit chances entirely, applies on both phases, and it does more until enemies have quite a lot of crit. What's more, Luck Plus also boosts hit and avoid. Luck Plus is already a meme skill, so that's quite the indictment. Non-Tiki units can always just attack at range or break killer weapon foes. 0 crit's a lot better than half crit. There's no killer tome or killer knife. I can think of a few annoying enemies with killer weapons, but none that make me wish I had a skill that costs 900 SP. 900 SP! One novice book away from Cantor. Oof. If Special Guard paid you SP to use it, it'd be alright. When you pay SP to inherit it, it's absolutely outrageous. It's not that there aren't actually a few places in the game where you want a unit to survive a hit from a powerful worm that has a special attack. It's that there just has to be a better way of getting that bulk or achieving the same objective that won't be literally useless on 90% of the maps in the game. Star Sphere's fun, but as I said analyzing Tiki, I think it's often overhyped. It adds a lot of stats, but most units don't care for most stats, and the units who do often just equip Tiki. You can do better. You can also do worse, though. If you're thinking, I want my darling clan to be the best like no one ever was, and I will spare no expense to accomplish this, Star Sphere is the skill for you. Inherit it early, train up while you still have Micaiah and Marth to accelerate XP gain, and then drop it later in the game so you can stack the early boosts with a skill that actually does something in combat. 1500 SP is pricey for a temporary skill, 10 times lineage, so I can't say this makes sense on a balanced team. If you want to play favorites though, this is a fun way to do it. Veronica's kit coheres nicely together, but I think that makes her skill struggle as inherits. The juiciness of Reprisal is offset by its cost, unfortunately, but there are some options here that could really shine with some planning. Book of Worlds has a price beyond its skill slot and reasonable 300 SP. You have to wait to use it. For most units, that's a deal breaker. If you're keeping a scrub around for moral support, however, there's a very neat synergy here. You can keep a unit frozen indefinitely by having 2 copies of the skill. You have 1 unit wait and 1 unit freeze, and then vice versa next turn. If you're looking for a way to flex your Fire Emblem gameplay skills, I'm sure you can do some neat things with this in challenge runs where many units have little to contribute. Similarly, in slow-paced casual runs, I'm sure you can use this for grinding or killing a scary boss you forgot to plan for. In between, Book of Worlds isn't great, you already have 1 Veronica. The flames are useful for getting rid of miasma, but as an inherit that is quite the fancy strat for quite the weak payoff. Knife Guard is probably the worst guard so far, which says a lot. The best use case for this is doing a bunch of enemy phase combat, but knives have poison, it's hard to see how that math is gonna math. Level boosts hard to use, you can always just try engaging to see what Roy's level plus 5 gives you, but you have to really keep your spreadsheets ready to plan around these stats. Roy can also take you above the level of enemies, which this can't. I'd consider this on a player phase passion project you're giving Lyn. If your Etier already has Lyn's Speed Taker, giving +2 speed on kills, this just stacks on that, and someone primarily using bows may be able to stay underleveled enough to use this and then get the stats you need for a boss kill. That's a reach, but I've got nothing better. Magic Dex Plus is pricey, like Strength Dex Plus was. You can argue for inheriting this on a few powerful mages with shaky hit rates, and unlike Strength, you can't easily replace this with a weapon power skill, but it's still a bit too rushed for my blood. It's decent as a skill to inherit on later recruits with their starting SP, making them a little more reliable for 1 or 2 maps. Reprisal is the Lamborghini of inherits, undeniably awesome if you can get past the price tag. Generally, I think it's best to inherit whatever else you need and use Veronica herself if you want this on a build, because Vantage, Resolve, and Holdouts are all cheaper. That being said, if you have the DLC, you have a lot of free skill books, and blowing a ton of them on Reprisal for your favorite character is a blast. Veronica's SP conversion also makes this more accessible than it looks, and combining Reprisal with Engage attacks or the enemy phase emblems feels fantastic as a reward for the investment you need to pull this together. There are easier ways to beat the game, but if you're a veteran player going for some heat, Reprisal's a key ingredient. Your Vander might even do damage to late game enemies. Like Vantage and Holdout, out of respect for the ceiling, I'll put it in good. SP conversion's quite the skill. It pays for itself quickly, just 15 kills. With DLC, you often have more than enough bond fragments, and this is technically optimal on many runs for some units who don't need a second skill slot immediately. That kind of micromanagement aside, like Star Sphere, this is a skill you get early for heavy over-the-top investment in a single unit, and replace once you have the SP to get the insane combo you wanted. If you're using a balanced team, the bond fragments you need to get this aren't worth it. Without grinding skirmishes or reinforcements, you can't just give everyone dozens of kills willy-nilly. SP has diminishing returns. Cantor's amazing at 1000 SP, but most units easily get that with DLC, and paying 2400 SP to get the last point in speed res plus 5 is not great value. If you want a superstar to murderize everything, focus on support skills like Rally Spectrum and Geosphere. Stacking those buffs scales way better than investing in individual skill slots. In Conquest, Camilla is known for many things, one of which is her skills. Her personal skill is isomorphic to Divinely Inspiring, and while not quite as good as in Engage, it's still one of the best personals. Her class line gives her an all-star selection of skills to pick from, and her low internal level makes it easier for her to pick them up. You'd think, for a unit who's supposedly all friendly and maternal fighting for the good guys now, she'd help our units learn a few of those awesome abilities, right? Right, Camilla? No? Whose side are you on? When discussing skills like Decisive Strike, people often argue that if you do triple damage on player phase and your enemy still has 5 HP afterwards, maybe you should be trying to find a better unit. In Engage on Maddening, this isn't as true as it sounds. Enemies get tanky, and this can actually score kills more often than you'd think, even on decent units. The player phase limitation is the bigger problem. Lunar Brace and Momentum add base damage that gets tripled if you crit, plus you get a benefit even without any RNG. Still, I can see this on dedicated crit builds. There are a few enemies in the game with holdout that this hard counters. If Detoxify made you immune to poison, by now I'm experienced at finding a niche for terrible skills, and I could probably spin something about how poison stacks can hurt enemy phase durability against groups of wolf knights later in the game. It's a tech option for 1 or 2 maps, maybe it'd be worth it. Well, just that you cure poison at the start of player phase? Any unit getting poisoned who cares usually does a lot of combat, and those units have better things to do with their skill slots. It's not like you need to hoard restore uses. Groundswell is a skill to make Camilla's own kit synergize better, not a generically good option. I think the biggest obstacle to me pretending this is worth inheriting on someone is that if you can inherit this, you have access to Camilla's Dragon Veins. If you use one of those, you can clear lots of flames and miasma at once. Do you really need to spend SP on doing this in more than one place at the same time? Okay, so a lot of enemies have lances, including some bosses. If you stack it with Nope, can't do it. Can't even pretend to defend this one. I expected better from Camilla. It is mathematically possible to construct a situation this is useful, but you'll need a full-on essay to justify why you don't have a better option. Speed Res is all the exponential scaling of the other double stat skills, but at least unlike HP Luck, you get one good stat. Speed plus 5 is 2000 SP, so getting that extra Res plus 5 will cost you 2800 SP. That's a hard bargain. I suppose it stacks with Speed Plus? You get this and Speed plus 5 to Amber, and you squint harder than you've ever squinted in your life, you basically have a stronger Kagetsu. Who needs dexterity? Wow, what an aesthetically pleasing arrangement. It's almost like I rigged it to work out like that. As you can see, most skills aren't great compared to a few standouts, same as it ever was, I suppose. I'm particularly interested in anything I've overlooked. If there's cool use cases for stuff I didn't mention, definitely let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you like what you saw here, check out the rest of Expertly Enjoying Engage.